It says staff in big print on the back, which is cool too, but also has gotten me some looks at some bars I've been in.
Took
The
it
thing
off
I
of
don't like
Terry
about
Funk's
it,
corpse.
it does a thing that I hate when like licensed merch does, which is that it says the name of the movie.
Oh,
Like I wish it just was, Double Deuce Jasper, Missouri, but then they had to put Roadhouse, just so everyone knows what it's from. I always hate it when they do that. Like
Me
let
too.
it just be an in joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we're recording now, so.
Apparently.
And cut. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. It's been a while since I've actually run point on one of these. I am Joe, and we have not quite a full house, but a fairly full house this week.
Yeah.
Joining me, we've got Cody.
What's up?
We have got Brett.
Howdy.
And we have Justin, I guess.
I guess I'm here too.
As usual, let's start by talking briefly about the thing or two that we've been up to in this past week. Anyone want to go first?
I can go first.
Go, Cody.
I spent a good chunk of this weekend that just passed shooting the dead.
Zombie uprising down in your area.
Go on.
Yes. Now I was doing some more of my cemetery searching, going around looking for some famous graves and trying to find their headstones and take some pictures by some of them. And I think I found maybe 10 or 12 this weekend. So it was a fruitful outing to me. I found a way on Google Maps. This is probably common knowledge, but if it's not, that you can basically permanently mark all the things on Google Maps that you eventually want to get to at some point in your life, and they stay on there permanently. So I have flagged all of the cemeteries that have somebody I want to visit at. So now whenever I go someplace, I just check if there's a cemetery relatively nearby. And I have, I think, all the cemeteries marked for Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois so far. That has anybody I'd want to see, but I have plans to add Wisconsin to that also sometime soon. And then my other quick little plug for me is going to be, I thought to myself about a week ago that I just don't have enough in my life because I'm a boring guy who sits around with free time all the time. And so for that reason, I actually started a second podcast. So the Fond Empire now also includes my wrestling podcast called Positively AEW. And we can be found on Facebook and also on Spotify only. So trying to do about every other day, just a little tiny show, like 15 minutes, just to recap what's going on or talk about a wrestler or two. So there we go.
Check it out. Fun.
Nice.
Who else has been up to something they want to talk about?
I talked previously on one of these that we had been watching a show called Slasher on Netflix, which is essentially a serial killer anthology series. And so we finally wrapped up the third season of that, and I would say all three seasons are pretty comparable in quality and styling. They're all very oh my God, there's some deaths that are I had to turn away. I couldn't even watch them. I was like, oh my God, that's horrifying. And it continues to be what makes it hard for me is there's a lot of characters in every season that are just awful people. They're just annoying and you want them to die, and they do, generally speaking. But a pretty good show overall if you can get past the characters who are douchebags. But we also watched last night a movie which had been on my my top 10 most anticipated list, which is Ace of Frankenstein. And it was fine. It was not as good as I hoped it would be, but it still was quirky and dark and kind of weird, weird and ridiculous. And so it had aspects of what I wanted. It just wasn't as much of it as I had hoped it would be. The dialogue wasn't quite as funny and quirky as I was expecting. But it had its moments. So including one scene with an axe to the groin.
Ouch.
That happened to me once.
Yeah.
It's not as painful as you'd think.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Did you say X to the groin?
No.
Oh.
Axe.
Never
What's her
mind.
name? Sharon?
Maybe.
That's me.
Justin, have you been up to anything?
A lot of what I've been doing
All right,
recently-
that's Justin, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm kidding.
a lot- Are you just angry that I've been doing more of these episodes?
I'm
than you?
joking. It's a
I
joke.
know. Well, I have been spending a lot of time prepping for what we're going to be doing next week, which is something a little different, something we haven't done on the podcast before. So I'm going to leave it mysterious for now. Stay tuned for that. Other than that, went to see Dune 2 yesterday, finally, and it was solid. I do feel like it jumped a little bit here and there, like in terms of a few plot elements, like they skipped things and it's just like, okay, well, we're at this spot now. But overall, I know it had a lot of material to try and condense, but I enjoyed it as someone who hasn't read the books, and I really should at some point. I liked it well enough.
A film that Steven Spielberg called one of the greatest science fiction films of all time.
Yeah,
Justin Henry calls solid.
And I'm sure this will be much to Joe's chagrin, but I have also gone about finalizing my attendance to the upcoming Man Weekend in the summer. So if you haven't checked that event, yeah, I am now attending. So yeah,
turns out I'm busy that weekend.
The price of the plane tickets dropped like over $100 from the last time I looked. So I'm like, okay, I can strike while the iron's hot. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's been me.
Nice. So. Can't wait to hear the podcast you and Joe doing Dune 2. It's going to be great.
Oh man, that could actually be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was only minorly joking. But...
I just wanted to shout out a couple quick things that I have watched recently.
Joe, what have you been up to?
Well, let me tell you. I think I mentioned on the last podcast I was on that I was going to see this movie the following day, which was Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, which I believe Justin also saw.
Yes.
Like a double podcast. This is great.
My God. I really enjoyed the movie.
Dune 2: Frozen Desert.
Cody, shut up. Anyway, I liked it a lot. I didn't like it quite as much as its predecessor, Ghostbusters Afterlife, but I still thought it was a lot of fun. Both of those movies, I think, managed to capture sort of the spirit of the original Ghostbusters movies, unlike the 2016 atrocity that we don't talk about. But yeah, good movie. Recommend checking it out. If not in theaters, watch it when it's streaming.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to give a quick shout out to is a documentary that we actually just finished watching like 2 hours ago. I, over the past few years, have increasingly been getting into watching hockey, specifically the Detroit Red Wings. And this season, I mean, they've been up and down, but it's been a lot of fun to watch. We've watched almost every game this season, so I'm even more into the Detroit Red Wings than I have ever been before.
Nice.
And along those lines, we just watched a documentary, which the entire movie is on YouTube, so easy to find if anyone wants to check it out. It's called The Russian Five, and it's about a sort of legendary group of players that the Red Wings recruited from Russia, kind of in the early to mid 90s. And it's really, I mean, I knew a lot of these players, even though I wasn't really watching the Red Wings around that time. Like, I was familiar with a lot of them. The really interesting thing to me is that there's a lot of like political intrigue in the story, where at least the first few of the players were recruited, during the Cold War while the Iron Curtain was still in place, and they literally had to defect from Russia to come join the Red Wings. So it's kind of an interesting story, just from a historical standpoint, and then also the impact they had on the team and its legacy is kind of hard to overstate. But again, it's called The Russian Five. It's on YouTube. It's only about an hour and a half. So if anyone's interested in sports in general or hockey specifically, highly recommend checking it out. That's all I've been up to. But now let's talk about the main reason that we are gathered here tonight, which is
Gordie Howe, Russian defector.
No. See a sleeper agent?
Maybe.
We're going to interrogate one of the greatest questions in perhaps the entire history of cinema. That question being, do pain hurt? That's right. We were talking about the 1989 classic motion picture Roadhouse. Wait, no, I mean, we're talking about the 2024 classic question mark motion picture Roadhouse. Wait, no, we're talking about both of them because that's how much we love our fan base. I know, it's exploding. Let's get right into things here and talk about the original Roadhouse, starring Patrick Swayze, released in 1989. I think it's fairly well known amongst our group that I am a big fan of this movie, but I was curious prior to me forcing at least some of you guys to watch this at a man night past. Did any of you have any like prior relationship to this movie at all? Was it, any part of your upbringing or formative years?
I probably have the weirdest initial
Ooh.
introduction to this. So in the strange extended lore of Mystery Science Theater 3000, Roadhouse is Crow T. Robot's favorite movie, to the point where he composed a song called A Patrick Swayze Christmas in one episode. And that was the first time I had ever heard of Roadhouse. And there were references to someone getting their throat ripped out, stealing money from the till. And I had no idea beyond, the fact that Patrick Swayze was in it and that apparently was ultra violent for a good number of years. I did eventually track it down on my own and watched it, and we'll get to what I thought about it, as the episode goes on. But
All right.
the first introduction was bizarre.
I don't think I had any. I mean, I knew of the movie, but I don't think I had seen it prior to that time we all watched it together at your house. The cover, if I'm remembering, 'cause I have to pull it up here, but the cover, I guess, I don't know if it's reflective of the actual movie you get, and I guess it is kind of. Back in the 80s and 90s, I feel like how you presented the movie on the cover probably mattered a lot more. I don't even know, like digital movies don't even have a cover, I guess, unless they like get a physical release later on down the road.
There's like
or whatever.
posters for the theater.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. But
yeah, I mean
yeah,
the artwork for Roadhouse is kind of funny because it's just various versions of Patrick Swayze standing with his arms crossed with like different things in the background.
Yeah. That's really it for me, though. My grandpa did have a T-shirt that said on it, "Does a hobby horse have a wooden dick?" which I never understood for a long time, but
That's amazing.
that part's not true. But anyway,
what about you, Brett?
I had not seen it until about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
As I was getting, we were starting to talk about this, and I said, well, I probably should go watch that the original. So, yeah, that was the first I'd seen it. I obviously had heard a bit about. I'd heard of it and then heard a bit about it, but really didn't know anything other than just the very basics of the plot. So
nice. I'll be very interested to hear your perspective. I mean, for me, I kind of grew up watching like R-rated movies way younger than I probably should have been. So this is a movie that I couldn't even tell you the first time I saw it. It's something that I just, watched repeatedly throughout the years. And it's kind of just always been a movie that I've watched a lot. I think I currently own at least 4 different copies of it in different formats.
Wow.
So not to spoil my, feelings about the movie, but that's kind of where I'm coming from going into this.
do you have 4 copies of Time Cop on DVD?
I do not own any copies of Time Cop, unfortunately.
Oh, we're going to talk about it today, so.
Oh, I'm excited.
Okay.
I kind of just want to give like a very vague overview of the movie and then just, dive into talking about specific scenes that stand out, quotes maybe, things like that. I feel like really all you need to know about the movie Roadhouse is that its director's name is Rowdy Harrington. with a name like Rowdy Harrington, I feel like you have at least some idea what you're probably getting into. Um, the movie, again, I don't know if I've mentioned this, stars Patrick Swayze as a character that Wikipedia says is named James Dalton. I believe in the entire movie, he is only ever referred to by his last name, Dalton.
Hmm.
I think maybe on his medical records you get a glimpse of his first name, but uh, he is just known as Dalton through the entire movie. And he is not a bouncer, he is a cooler who is like a head bouncer who teaches bouncers how to bounce.
The cooler.
At the beginning of the movie, we meet him in a fancy bar in New York where he's kind of overseeing things, but he quickly gets recruited to go to the small fictional town of Jasper, Missouri to help clean up the titular roadhouse. And that's really the main setup of the movie. He ends up taking this job for a not insignificant sum of money. Um, his pay demand is $5,000 up front and $500 a night cash. I ran this through a currency converter, and in 2024 dollars, that would be $12,513 and some change up front and $1,251 per night,
Nice.
which is just
Dang.
an insane sum of money. But I mean, I guess when you see what follows and what this job actually consists of, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah.
So he goes to this bar called the Double Deuce, or the Double Douche, as a later character will call it. And is basically tasked with cleaning it up. It's just like a shitty hellhole of a dive bar where, you know, people get out of hand all the time. And
It's the
initially,
baddest honky tonk in a Missouri town, according to the official tagline.
sure is a honky tonk. So that's a job he signs up for, but then he ends up getting dragged into this sort of larger conflict between the residents of this small town and Brad Wesley, who is a rich asshole who kind of owns the town, or at least, you know,
Thinks he does.
he thinks he does. He's running a protection racket, so he's basically extorting money from all the local business owners under the guise of the Jasper Improvement Society, I believe it is. And so over the course of the movie, things kind of escalate to being a showdown between Dalton and the other town folks and this rich asshole. And only one can survive. Who will it be? Spoiler alert, it's Dalton. I
See,
mean,
that's how you know it's fiction. The rich asshole isn't the one who survives.
That's true. That is very true. I mean, so that's a rough outline of the movie. But I mean, what this movie has kind of become famous or infamous for is the fact that it just kind of goes balls to the wall at every turn. There's all kinds of just like one-liners and action and boobs, and there's literally a monster truck.
True.
Which is, I mean, it is not Chekhov's monster truck. It gets used. You know, there's a pretty infamous moment of violence between Dalton and the sort of, you know, main hired muscle guy. I would venture to say that this movie goes hard. And so I just wanted to kind of throw it over to you guys. Like, what were your thoughts on, I guess, the movie in general, and were there like any specific moments that really you enjoyed?
No.
You can go first if you want.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I have my full thoughts. No.
Oh. All right. So I watched this again for the first time in a good number of years. And I do say I would say the first half of the movie is definitely better written than the second half in terms of like just overall pacing and investment and stuff. Once you reach about the midway point, then things almost get a little cartoonishly violent, which is still fun, but it feels like it doesn't have quite as much of the same cohesion, the same quality of the writing as the first half, which is fine. It's still a very fun movie, But it's interesting how there's like a delineating point where it's just it almost feels like it's a different writer took over for a little bit or something.
I don't know if I go quite that far, but I know what you mean. You're
Okay.
not wrong that there is a little bit of a shift.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny that you said it. Like one of the big things that I took away from it was like the first half of the movie for me was like, well, first of all, the entire movie is like very 80s. Like
Yeah.
80s movies, like so many of them have this just a weird feel. Like they just you know it's an 80s movie just watching it. But like I would say like the first half of the movie for me, like the dialogue and the writing was like very like not fleshed out. It was like there were scenes there that were just like there to move things along a bit. You know, like just one in particular, like kind of like that opening scene where the guy comes, the bar owner comes to like try and hire Dalton. He's just like, here's a situation, here's money, and he's just like, yeah, I'll take it. And I was like, well, you're not gonna ask any questions about the situation.
I mean, again, that's a pretty big chunk of change, though.
Yeah.
Right. It's true, but like like it could have been
No,
any kind
that's
of situation.
true.
He just doesn't ask any questions. He's like, yeah, I'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah, well, and then the
Like,
owner of the
just
club
quits
he's
the job
at,
he's at.
yeah, like the owner of that club comes in, he's just like, "Well, I'm gone."
Yeah, it's like imagine doing that in a job, but
Don't
yeah,
tempt me.
I mean, I do like I see what you mean though about like later scenes, not necessarily being pieced together. They just like action scene, new action
Yeah,
scene, new
it's
action
just like
scene.
this is where the action starts and
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I forgot to
yeah.
mention. I mean, going back to that first scene, I have it in my notes. I love the fact that the owner of the Double Deuce, who's trying to recruit Dalton, says that it used to be a sweet deal. Now it's the kind of place that they sweep up the eyeballs after closing. Like, what? He just says that casually, like it's like that's a figure of speech. They sweep up the eyeballs after closing.
Yeah, it's like something you'd expect to hear out of like, a cyberpunk story or something like
Yeah.
that, where people regularly do get dismembered on the street.
I mean, to me, like for me, I guess especially in the first, half or 2/3 of the movie, a lot of my enjoyment of the movie is the writing. There are a lot of like clever and kind of weird like one-liners and jokes. Like there's I feel like there's a decent amount of wit to a lot of it. I also just I don't know. I like the way the character of Dalton is portrayed, at least until things get maybe a little cartoonish. But he's kind of this tortured soul. He has a degree in philosophy from NYU, and it seems like he's like a pacifist who somehow is working, in this inherently violent line of work. But it seems like his whole sort of personal philosophy is that he tries to avoid violence until he can't anymore. There's this whole scene where he's trying to explain how he wants to run things to his crew of bouncers at the Double Deuce, and he gives this speech, which is one of my all-time favorites, about how he wants them to be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what does that mean? Like, what he basically says, like, don't let it be personal. It's a job. One of my favorite parts of that is like one of them's like, what if somebody calls me a cocksucker? And he's like, it's just two nouns strung together to elicit a prescriptive response or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy says, what if someone calls my mama a whore? And he goes, is she?
Is she?
Like just
That is a great
like
line,
lines
yeah.
like that. Like it's hilarious. But
Yeah.
I think he is presented as, like a kind of interesting character because of things like that. It seems like he's like the smartest guy in the room and he knows it. It's like he doesn't really seem to enjoy the violence, but he knows that he is the best in any given situation. So it seems like he would prefer to use his head to, get out of things, but he can back it up if he has to.
Yeah, I enjoyed the kind of the continuing joke of him like not being a big man.
Yeah, I thought you'd be bigger.
Yeah. So it made me think, well, I should look. He's actually 6 foot tall. He's not like a short man.
I saw a thing that said he was
Is
5'10".
he?
Huh.
Oh, okay. No, actually, yeah, that is. This must be like his brother or something.
Oh.
I saw
Frank
Swayze.
Swayze?
I saw Swayze. And I said,
Frank
Oh.
so
Swayze.
yeah.
I mean,
5'10".
I guess that is a question I should ask you guys is how did you feel about the character and characterization of Dalton in this movie?
I thought it was they made him more than just like a meathead, more than just like a big strong guy, or little strong guy as the case may be. He almost gave off this sort of warrior monk kind of persona in a way.
Oh yeah,
that,
for
that
sure.
yeah, the grounded kind of I'll fight if I have to, but I don't want to sort of philosophy. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to come out on top. But if I can avoid it at all, if it's at all possible, I'm going to. And I liked that because he's in a job that is very confrontational, very very violent, very dangerous, and he still tries to talk people out of that end, and it's kind of cool, I think.
Yeah.
Because it at least implies that there is always the chance for a peaceful resolution.
Yeah,
Doesn't
well, even
always
in the opening scene, we see there's that guy who's like trying to confront him. He's like, "I always wanted to try you." Like he specifically wants to try to fight Dalton, and he says, "Okay, let's take this outside." And they go outside, and then he just like backs up. Dalton backs up, and his bouncers kind of form a wall in front of him, and it's like, yeah, he's not fighting this guy. Like he just is not interested in that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the character. I thought he was pretty interesting just in like his traits, and it was acted well. Like he was believable in that, that's who this person was.
Yeah,
I
agree.
And I think they specific moments are coming to mind right now, but I feel like they did kind of dive into like what makes the character tick a little bit, at least. They don't always do that in movies, and I think they did that decently well.
I
Cody,
think
do you
he
have any
was an
thoughts about
okay
anything?
character. No, nobody's gonna like me for this, but I actually have a really hard time with Patrick Swayze as an action star, like legit. Character I thought was fine. I do think you all may bring up good points, like he's well written and stuff. I just have a hard time picturing him as like intimidating, which I guess is part of it as well.
That's kind of the point, though. Like I think that's why he works so well here.
Yeah. For the character, it works well. I think just as the viewer, I'm not intimidated by this guy because he's Patrick Swayze. But I don't know. I was just actually looking through his filmography, and what my favorite movie of his is? I think actually that he did
Ghost.
Tall Tale.
None of them.
Oh.
None of them is the answer.
We got a Swayze hater.
We might have a Swayze hater. I'm looking through I guess The
Slater.
Outsiders was okay. Oh, he was in Donnie Darko. Okay.
Yeah,
Donnie Darko. That's the
He
best
was
one.
in charge of Sparkle Motion.
There we go. No, I had some other thoughts though on the movie here. You guys mentioned quotes, great quotes. All I did for my notes for these was just kind of stream of consciousness as I was watching through, and
Perfect.
first one I wrote down was the Morgan was born an asshole and just grew bigger. That's a great line.
I almost wrote that one down on this watch through.
I had the Mama Horror one down as well. Pain Don't Hurt, of course. The one I said earlier with the joke about my grandpa, which didn't happen, but does a hobby horse have a wooden dick? I thought that was pretty funny as well. And then of course my last quote I wrote down. Remember that blonde? She could suck start a Harley. Whoa.
I like that one because it's kind of in the background. Like if you're not really paying attention, you won't necessarily catch it.
Yeah.
You didn't write down Terry Funk saying, "I heard you got balls big enough to come in a dump truck."
Oh, I didn't write that one down. No.
What does that even mean? Do you like? I don't want to analyze that too much, but
I don't know. There were some good moments in this also, which I just made little notes of. Who was the evil blonde? What was her name?
Denise, I think.
The first thing I know was like the blonde's hair, and I was referring to the evil blonde. I was like, the blonde's hair is half the cast of this movie.
I mean, there's some great hair all around in this movie.
Patrick
Swayze's got an awesome mullet going on.
All right, one of my favorite scenes early in this movie was Patrick Swayze Watching across the lake where the bad guy mansion is, of course, he turns off his light so as not to be seen, then promptly walks through his apartment over to the only light that's on and stands there and watches.
Uh,
What else we got in here? Most awkward kiss in movie history at Dalton's house? Yes.
Clearly,
got
you've never
that
seen
one.
the movie Purple Rain.
Actually, I haven't seen Purple Rain. Um, oh, I did have a question, and you might know as the expert of the movie here, Joe, or somebody else maybe researched this. Did Kelly Lynch actually accept pay for her role, or was it just to get the dance with Sam Elliott? That was my question.
oh,
That's a good question, actually. I
Right?
I was going to bring this point up. I have recently heard from multiple independent sources, only one of which is myself. Uh, it's come to my attention that Sam Elliott in this movie is the hottest any man has ever looked in the history of mankind. And I say this like half jokingly, but like there's like a critic I follow who recently watched this movie for the first time for similar reasons. We're here to discuss the remake and had posted something about how incredibly hot Sam Elliott is in this movie. And my wife said the same thing, just kind of independent of that. And I was watching this movie and I was like, you know what? They're not wrong. Like, he's just
Yeah.
like super charismatic. Like, there's just something about that charming mofo in this movie. Miho.
I did write down that his hair was amazing. That's one of my notes I
He's got
put as I
great
was
hair. I
watching.
mean, he
Yeah.
looks good with the stubble too, as opposed to, the giant mustache we're kind of used to seeing him with.
Yeah, he's got the longer hair here than normal. Kind of
Yeah.
I mean, I
greasy.
think he's great in that role too. The mentor character, Wade Garrett.
Yeah.
The owner of the Double Deuce seems to agree too. I've always been amused by the fact that when he first meets Wade Garrett, he just looks at him leeringly and is like, "I know you."
oh,
Let's see. What else? What else? We got to at least spend a second talking about the music in this film, which is fantastic.
Wow, I'm kind of amazed that we agree on that point.
Why wouldn't we? You got two musics here. You got the band playing, which is fantastic through the whole movie.
Mhm.
Every song they do cover wise is
Random
fantastic.
random quick bit of trivia.
Yeah.
The front man for the band that plays at the very beginning of the movie at the first club he's in was also the front man for his name's Tito Lariva, and he was also the front man for a band called Tito and Tarantula, which is the band that appears in the Robert Rodriguez Quentin Tarantino film From Dusk Till Dawn.
Really?
Yes.
nice.
Okay. Interesting.
Anyway, go ahead, Cody. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, is that, I know the lead singer has a name that's mildly famous, at least at the,
Jeff Healey.
is that an actual band? Is that like his
I
band
believe
or?
that is actually, it was just the Jeff Healey band, but I'm pretty sure
Okay.
that is his actual band in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty awesome. I also like that they included the lead singer as like a character off and on.
Yeah, I thought he
For tiny
was-
moments, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's clear he's not like a, great actor, but I think he does pretty well.
Yeah.
I like that he's got, some history with Dalton there and has some fun interactions.
So points for that. And then also I gave the movie another point because you could tell this was made in 1989 because they used the song Shaboom Shaboom from Clue in 1985. It was a little homage. Clearly they were big fans. So extra point for that also. There he is.
It's weird because the Jeff Healey band had like a big hit in the 80s that does not at all sound bluesy or like anything that they play in this movie.
Oh, really?
Which is ironically called Angel Eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which everyone's probably heard. I say it's ironic because Jeff Healey lost both of his eyeballs to cancer when he was like 10 years old.
Cancer is the angel.
Oh.
We can edit that out later.
We're
We're not going to, though.
Oh.
But yeah, I agree. The music throughout the movie is pretty great.
And also the nudity.
I
the
mean,
nudity is pretty good.
Better nudity than the other
Um,
film we're going to talk about tonight. So
It's very true.
Despite
one
there
very
being, oh, go
oh,
on.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, despite there being in the little pop up breakdown of the R rating that the remake got, nudity
Yeah,
was
right.
mentioned, and I think there's like one character on a balcony, like 40 feet away from the camera.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just yeah.
Yeah.
An R rating doesn't mean what it used to.
One thing that stood out to me this time around watching Roadhouse is the fact that there is both a good fat guy and an evil fat guy. One
Indeed.
thing
That's true.
I think I've commented on this in past podcasts, but like one trope from like the 80s and early 90s that amuses me is the idea of the strong fat guy. Like in a lot of like your like Streets of Rages and like side-scrolling fighters like that, there are always enemies that are like fat guys that are, supposed to be like tough fighters. And that's, as a fat person myself, that's just not how being fat works. So like it's always amused me that, one of the henchmen in Roadhouse is a fat guy, but I always forget that there's also one of the good bouncers is also a fat guy.
Yeah.
Just a random thing that amused me.
Nice.
One thing I wanted to mention that I guess I had never really thought about before this viewing is that I feel like there's a lot of practical effects in this movie in terms of like there's a couple explosions that to me look like they like actually blew some buildings up.
Yeah.
There's also a scene where they drive a monster truck through a Ford dealership and it looks pretty convincingly like they actually did that for this movie.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm a fan of practical effects in general whenever possible. And not to spoil too much about the other movie, but it maybe did not fare so well on that front.
You imagine the on scene when they're like filming the monster truck going through the glass and smashing the windows, and the director's just like, "You got one fucking chance at this. You better not blow it."
Yeah.
Seriously.
Take two. Oh no.
No.
It's gonna take a while.
What any other general thoughts about the 1989 Roadhouse?
As action flicks go, you could do a hell of a lot worse.
Do you believe that Jimmy used to fuck guys like Dalton in prison?
I do.
I think it's all talk.
I was
I
convinced
bet
by the
you.
performance.
I mean,
I
go
was
ahead.
I was just gonna say, just filmmaking wise, one thing that stood out to me towards the end of the film, which I just felt was very different than most movies, even today, but especially in like the late 80s, when Dalton's like in the bad guy's house, the camera work switches to like following the henchman through the house. Like we don't know where the actual protagonist is. We're following the evildoer through the house,
Oh
which I
yeah.
thought was a
Mhm.
little different than most films, where you'd maybe see like him crouching behind someplace, or we would know where he's at, but we didn't there. So that stood out to
That's
me.
true.
Yeah. Sort of a Batman framing where he's, taking them
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. I guess my overall thoughts on it was that it was much closer to Rambo than I was expecting it to be, and I enjoyed it for that. Especially that that second half, like you said, there was like big explosions that I was like, what come from?
Yeah, there's a scene where he jams the accelerator pedal of the car down with the knife and like just sends it flying at the guys,
Right?
and
Yeah,
that
that was great.
explodes.
That was cool.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it was actually it. I was expecting it to be just like a brawling kind of like whatever, and then it turned out to be like a pretty good like revenge / justice flick.
Yeah.
And it was kind of unexpected for me, and I enjoyed that.
He rips some throats out.
Yeah, he did.
People
You-
get
you-
shot.
You mentioned Streets of Rage earlier. Thinking about it, this actually would have made for a decent side-scrolling beat 'em up. Like an
Yeah.
adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Work on it, Justin.
Yeah.
I
can
can't
have-
afford the rights to Roadhouse, especially now that there's a remake.
You can
Yeah.
just
I mean,
call it
Bezos owns it now, so
House of
Yeah.
Road. It's like Streets of
Womp
Rage.
womp.
House of Road.
How did you guys feel about the throat ripping?
That was
Um,
cool.
I mean, it's probably one of maybe the most iconic thing about this movie, and like I've always thought it was cool, but this time think I just overthought it to where, a spoiler for future discussion, but one thing I like about this movie is that Dalton is like haunted by his past. And apparently there was an incident in the past where he was confronted by someone with a gun and like in a like some sort of reaction, like tore the guy's throat out. We get going back to the super sexy Sam Elliott. Dalton's still like being haunted by this, and Wade Garrett says something to the effect of, when someone sticks a gun in your face, you got two choices. You can die or you could kill the motherfucker. Like, it was self-defense. But like this time around, I'm like, it's still cool and it looks cool. And like when he, obviously when he kills the guy that we see, it's because he's got a gun in him. But how is throat ripping your go-to? Like, even if you have to, if someone's pointing a gun at you and you have to kill them, like, how is that even a skill you have? Like, how?
I could see hitting them hard enough in the throat to like collapse their trachea or something. Yeah,
something like that. But to like literally like, Justin, you're the one who likes to overly analyze physics. Would it be physically possible for someone to just tear someone's jugular out with their bare hands?
It would be hard because there is a lot of, most of the muscle is like on the sides, but there is still like skin to get through. There's, and you still have to be able to grab on and pull with enough force that you overcome all of that. It's the same thing with like in zombie movies, like where, a zombie bites through someone's pant leg and like takes a chunk of flesh out. The human jaw doesn't really do that.
Yeah.
So I think throat ripping, it theoretically could be possible, but you'd need to be strong as hell and just have a perfect grip to be able to, take all of that with you when you pulled your hand away.
Wait,
you heard it here,
filed down.
Oh, we got everyone talking at once. Cody, go.
I was just saying, way to ruin zombie movies too.
Brett, go.
I was just saying, if you had your fingernails filed down to points, maybe you could like get in there.
I was thinking that, like,
that would help. Yeah.
I was going to say, you heard it here, folks. Patrick Swayze had perfect grip.
Whoa, that is not endorsed by all of us.
Well, so the other aspect of that kind of amused me this time is like, even if you go along with the throat ripping thing, so it makes sense that he does it to Jimmy, who's like the main, martial arts douchebag, because he's got a gun on him. But then once he gets into Brad Wesley's house, it seems like he's like throat rip crazy. Like, I think there's like another time where he at least almost does it, and then when he has his final confrontation with Brad Wesley, he's got him pinned down, and he's like, he has his throat ripping hand back, like he's about to go for it, but then he stops himself, and it's like the whole point up to then was that was something that he was like haunted by, like having trouble dealing with, and now all of a sudden he's just like, I'm gonna rip everyone's throat out. I'm a throat ripping machine. Roadhouse should have called this movie Throat House. That's not the movie. That's a totally different film. Anyway, how did you guys feel about the ending in terms of, so Dalton doesn't rip Brad Wesley's throat out, but then Brad Wesley pulls a gun secretly out. But then he gets gunned down by basically all of the like local business owners that we've seen him being an asshole to throughout the movie. Like, they all show up with shotguns and like each of them takes a shot at him.
It was a scene of a millionaire in today's dollars, who would probably be billionaire, getting his weight doubled in lead. I can't not like that.
Yeah. Yes. I always like that aspect of it. Like, it feels like, Dalton has really kind of ingrained himself in this community and, inspired these people to stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty satisfying way to end, though, like completely ridiculous. And they all show up and like, where did they go? Just materialized on the walls, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and then they just like go and stash the guns, and then
in like finally, the next room.
Finally, the sheriff, who it didn't seem like this town had, shows up, and he's like, does anyone want to tell me what the hell happened here? And they're all just like, I didn't see nothing. Did you see anything? No, I didn't see nothing.
A
So it's
polar bear
like,
fell on me.
and then that's the last note I have. A polar bear fell on Tinker.
I love
That's
that line.
I my wife and I randomly quote that to each other just like all the time.
Nice.
Polar bear fell on me. And that's kind of wraps up the 1989 classic question mark Roadhouse. Anyone have any final thoughts before we do some ratings?
No, I'd say go
Yeah,
for it.
All right, well, I'm going to hold on to mine for last. I'm sure it'll be very surprising for people. Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Do it,
Um,
Cody. Set
Oh
the
no.
bar low.
Strengths, well, it's not gonna be that low. Strengths for me for this movie again are really just the music throughout the movie. I think is really good. A lot of those famous quotes and one-liners are really fun, fantastic. Pretty good action in here as well. There's definitely some over-the-top ridiculousness here, which I do appreciate being at the tail end of the 80s here. Um, I guess I'm still torn on Patrick Swayze himself as an action star, which I mentioned, but he works in the role here as goofy as this movie is. Now, I will say, if this is a movie, much like I think a lot of the movies from the 80s, if this was like your 80s movie, I could see how this would be like a near perfect movie to you, just like we all have our 80s classics that we enjoy. Um, it's not for me because I didn't watch till much, much later in life, but I do appreciate a lot about it. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10 for me.
All right.
Okay.
What about you, Justin?
Yeah, this is a movie that if I was just hanging out with friends or it happened to be on and I saw I saw flipping through the channels or whatever Roadhouse was on, I'd sit down and watch it. If someone says you want to watch Roadhouse, I'd probably say sure because it is a very fun film. Like I said, a bit lopsided. I do feel the first half is stronger than the second, but still pretty enjoyable from start to finish. Not perfect in my opinion, but it's still a movie that I would enjoy pretty much on any given day. So that said, I would give this one about 7.5 out of 10.
All right, Brett.
Uh, I I also enjoyed the movie overall. Again, like I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be going into it, and it kind of surprised me a bit by the end. I say like the first half, I didn't enjoy as much. I enjoyed like some of the one-liners and a few of the scenes and the characters, but I wasn't really into it until it started getting more action oriented. And I really enjoyed the last half of the movie. It was a fun ride for me from that point on. It was still pretty ridiculous at points, and it was a few points. It was like a little hard to take seriously, and maybe it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. Who knows? I don't know. But a lot of 80s movies seem to be that way a lot. But overall, I enjoyed it. It was different than what I expected, and I gave it extra points for all the boobs, and yeah, and this I probably would also go about 7.5.
All right. I like that it gets extra points for boobs. I mean, again, for me, maybe like as Cody said, maybe this just is one of my movies. I mean, which is fair. Um, I think to me, what I take from this movie is that unlike a lot of movies that movies that we've watched at man weekends and kind of I've seen a lot of people refer to this as a camp classic. But to me, what I think sets this movie apart is unlike a lot of those movies, which feel like someone set out to make like a real movie or like a good movie and it just went horribly wrong and they're kind of enjoyable for their unintentional badness. I feel like this is exactly the movie that Rowdy Harrington set out to make. Like to me, everything about this movie, no matter how ridiculous it gets, feels intentional. You know, it doesn't feel like they were trying to do something different or something super serious, and it just ended up being kind of silly. Like I think this is exactly the movie that they set out to make, and I think it's a great movie. I fully admit that nostalgia probably plays a large part for me, but um honestly, my wife, I think, is in the same camp as I am, and she never saw this movie until we met each other. Like, she watched it because I talked about it all the time, and it's like one of her favorite movies too. Like, this is a movie that we will watch usually multiple times per year together. Like, it's just that much fun, and we love it that much. I actually, on this most recent viewing, watched it on a special edition 4K Blu-ray disc, which actually looks kind of phenomenal. But that's how much I love this movie, is the moral of the story. So for me, it may not be an objectively perfect movie, but in my heart, it is a perfect movie. It is one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. And therefore, I give it a perfect 10 out of 10.
Ooh.
On the other end of the spectrum,
This movie could have used more of the little kid from October Sky, I feel like. That would really solidify it.
I don't know what that is.
It's a movie about some kids that shoot some rockets.
Oh.
It's based on a true story. Some of the early pioneers of NASA.
Well, speaking of movies that have kids in them, just this year, I think just last month, they released a updated version, remake, I guess, of Roadhouse. I believe when this was in early development, it was actually supposed to star Ronda Rousey,
Oh, that's
the
right.
I saw that as
MMA
well,
fighter,
yes.
in
Oh,
a
man.
in a gender swap, but shockingly, at some point, she got removed from the project or bowed out, and it ended up starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
Hey, he was in October Sky.
I don't know what that is.
We should watch it. It's a great movie. It's like
And
Paddington 2, but has heart.
mm, speaking of movies that don't have heart, so in this updated version of Roadhouse, Jake Gyllenhaal plays Elwood Dalton for some reason. I feel like they gave him a weird name just because.
Yep.
Is he a secret blues brother? I don't know.
Maybe.
Um, in the new version, Elwood Dalton is a disgraced former MMA fighter who is basically making a living scamming people in like underground fights, including Post Malone. I'm sorry, Austin Post, as he's credited in this movie.
Oh,
But this Dalton, who is a former MMA fighter, ends up getting recruited to go to the Florida Keys to help clean up a roadhouse, which is called the Roadhouse,
The Roadhouse.
which I think tells you everything you need to know about the level of creativity that went into this movie. It's one of those things where they try to make a joke about that, but it doesn't cover their sins. Like,
Yeah. Like the same guy who named the Roadhouse also owns a boat.
it's called Boat.
Yeah,
Or The Boat.
the boat.
Yeah.
Just
Anyway,
This is what
I thought for
People
sure it was
in
going to be called
Hollywood
the
these
Boathouse.
days.
but it
Um,
I
wasn't.
did also.
that would have been better.
that would have been a lot better. The Boathouse. So it's kind of a similar overall storyline in that there's a rich asshole. In this version, instead of just having like an extortion racket, so we have Billy Magnuson, who's an actor I like a lot, especially in douchebag roles. He's basically like a spoiled rich asshole son of his father's like a billionaire, presumably. And we learn over the course of the movie that they're trying to buy out or otherwise get rid of the Roadhouse because it's interfering with their plans to open a giant resort. We have actual MMA fighter Connor McGregor in basically the Jimmy role as the like hired muscle who goes hard.
Oh, I
Yeah,
forgot.
I don't.
That's the nudity tag for the rating.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
there was that.
But
Anyway, I don't really want to spend too much time going over plot points for this remake, but I just want to know what you guys thought of this movie.
Well, they decided to have it set in Florida, so that's automatically minus 10 points from Gryffindor. Uh,
Ooh, I disagree on that.
like there were so many changes they made that didn't really seem to serve any real purpose. I mean, did the whole Florida Keys island culture really add anything to the plot? I
There
don't
was a
think so.
plot?
I mean, that also. I mean, it's a matter of, you know, you look at so many movies coming out these days, and they just seem kind of empty or hollow or soulless. That's this movie. It's just there's nothing to it. They were like, oh, the rights to this franchise are cheap. Let's remake it and see if we can make a quick buck. And it feels like everyone in this film is just there showing up, phoning it in to collect a quick buck. There's no there's no heart behind it. There's no authenticity behind really any of the roles, any of the performances. It's it's like a pantomime of an actual movie in a way. Just
Ooh, that's a good way to put
ugh.
it.
I'm
Thank you. I'll try.
going to start this movie with this.
Mhm.
I mentioned on the last movie that if this would have been my 80s baby and they remade it, it's going to be dog shit for me no matter what, regardless. Because for many years now, it's been rumored, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard for many years that Ryan Reynolds actually owns the rights to Clue, the movie. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know he wants to remake it and has for like 10 years now, but it hasn't happened.
Mhm.
But if he ever does, like, I'm gonna think that that's pure dog shit when it comes out finally because that's one of my 80 babies, right? So I can see like if this is again your movie, you're going into this, it's gonna be an
Well, let me
automatic
let me, I mean, let me
strike one,
interject for a
strike two,
second.
right?
Like, let me
Well,
kind of set my expectations just
Yeah.
because this was my movie. My knee-jerk response when I heard they were remaking Roadhouse was why? Like, it's a perfect movie. It doesn't need to be remade. There's no way they're going to be able to do like 90% of the stuff that happened in the original because society will not allow a lot of that stuff anymore. So like I
yeah.
mean I was like angry a little bit. I didn't understand the need for it, but when they announced this version, when they announced Jake Gyllenhaal as a star, I was like, all right, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. I'm kind of intrigued. They released a trailer for it, and I didn't think it looked like Roadhouse, but it at least looked like a fun action movie.
Hmm.
So I tried to go into it with an open mind, honestly. And like in general, I always try to have that approach, even if I have, some internal biases. It always pisses me off when like people get angry about adaptations of books because they made changes, and it's like the word adaptation implies that changes are taking place. I almost feel like any given work of art, even if it's an adaptation, you at least need to try to like take it on its own merits, assuming it has any.
Hmm.
I at least want to give a remake a chance to justify its existence. Um, whether this one did or not, we'll see. But go on, Cody.
Well, I tell you what, before I jump into a little more of this, I just want to point out that my background is what I got when I typed in Dave Mansell as a cooler at a club. But anyway, um, I think a lot of comments for this one are going to be focused through the lens of the second to last thing I wrote down on my notes for this movie, which is this movie should have been called Dalton. It shouldn't have been called Roadhouse because this is the story of a guy. It's not a story of a roadhouse. It's just a movie that has a roadhouse in the movie. And I would more or less really argue that it's not really a remake at all because it's a different plot. It's a different focus. It's
Yeah.
just has the same name, unfortunately. If this was named something else and we were talking about it, I feel like we'd probably have a different way to look at the comments tonight. But
It still
No,
wouldn't have been good though.
no, no.
well, we'll talk about that. But just to kind of think about, I don't know, at least my lens of how I'm looking at this. When I finished up, that was the first thing I thought of, was like, this is not really Roadhouse. This is Dalton. So
Hmm.
Yeah,
how about that suicide attempt at the beginning, huh?
Yeah,
That was way darker than I expected to
that
start the
was pretty
movie.
dark.
Yeah.
That was one of the few things that kind of surprised me in this movie.
Mhm.
But I don't know. It For you to say that this should have been called Dalton implies that it is actually a character study of Dalton, and that he does not have a character at all in this movie. So
He just has a
that's
smirk. That's
yeah,
it.
like that's
Yeah.
that's kind of my biggest beef with this is that they literally got rid of everything that made the character of Dalton interesting in the original. And
Yeah.
this version has like no character development whatsoever. I mean, he's a disgraced former MMA fighter who has this dark thing in his past, which is like seriously hinted at throughout most of the movie. And then we finally see it. Spoiler alert, it turns out he killed someone in the ring, but we don't know why. We don't really know, like,
Yeah.
what took him there mentally, like what was his relationship with this person. We don't really see that
It's
haunting him throughout the movie. It's
it's
just like, go
several
ahead, Justin.
characters like imply he was a friend or something.
Yeah.
I think they even
yeah.
go as far as say it was like almost his best friend.
I think
Yeah.
they do, but then again, but we don't know that, we still don't see that relationship, and we really don't know. We just see the moment happen with no context, or we don't hear. There's never a scene where he like opens up to someone about what actually happened in that moment or anything like that.
Yeah, they leave it completely open as to whether it was an accident or whether he killed this person on purpose, or like they
Heat of the
there's a
moment
lot.
kind of
Yeah,
a
there's
thing.
like a basically, yeah, that's what they kind of hint at, is like he just like went into this rage and like
Yeah.
whatever, like couldn't be controlled at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. He doesn't like have any. They like hint at this like remorse, but we don't see it at all. And it again, he has like his best friend or a friend, and it doesn't. We really don't see anything about him like caring about it at all.
No, and he's like, I mean, throughout the movie, he is just a violent person. Like there's absolutely none of the like philosophical side of the first movie, none of the like be nice until it's time to not be nice. In the very first scene where he's training, I think his name's Billy, the like younger bouncer that he's like training.
Who knows?
Like from the start, he's just teaching him how to like hit people and fight. And there is not even a suggestion of, violence should be a last resort. You should try to de-escalate things without resorting to violence.
It's just like if someone is coming at you with a knife, this is what you do. There's
Yeah.
no stop it from getting to that point in the first place. It's just like, well, there's going to be fights. Here's how you don't get stabbed. You're shot or whatever,
Yeah. Like there's the one nod to that is, and it's weird to me that this is, I think, like the one quote from the original movie where there is an echo of the scene where he's getting stitched up by an attractive doctor, and he says, "Nobody wins a fight," which like is a line that's from the original movie. But it's like that doesn't seem like it rings true for this version of Dalton.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels more like his version is like basically outright telling the guy, like, you don't want to do this because I'm gonna fuck you up if you get in this fight with me. It's like, I don't know. Seems like he has more external dialogue, where original OG Dalton had more like internal thoughts, I think, before he processed and then acted.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like pieces there that could make the character interesting, but they didn't do anything with them. And I don't think like Jake Gyllenhaal didn't do anything to improve that either.
No, I mean, I like Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor, and I mean, he definitely got in great shape for this movie. Like, he's jacked as hell. But honestly, I mean, going back to Cody's point about not buying Patrick Swayze as like an action person, like to me, yes, Jake Gyllenhaal looks more like an action star in this movie, but that makes the character less interesting to me. Like part of why the first movie works, why Dalton works in the first movie, is because he's smaller than you thought. He's not what you would expect. Whereas like this
Mhm.
version of Dalton very much is just a big beefy dude. And also like there's something about Jake Gyllenhaal's voice, which I mean isn't his fault, but like he just doesn't have the presence, I feel like,
Hmm.
that Patrick
Yeah.
Swayze had in the original. Where like even though he's this bigger guy, he doesn't have the same like stoic kind of intimidating feeling that I feel like
Mhm.
Patrick Swayze had. Like you kind of
Yeah.
believe that Swayze could just back up anything he said. And
Yeah,
like,
like there's always just like a certain look behind his eyes.
yeah,
Yeah, or like the way he's standing or something that projects a sense that this guy does know what he's doing, even if he doesn't look like you're what you might imagine, you know, a heavyweight threat to be. But yeah, he had that presence, he had that air of intimidation about him. Um, and I agree, I didn't get that from
I
Gyllenhaal
feel like
like
there's
at all.
almost just like an inherent goofiness about Jake Gyllenhaal, which I mean, again, is probably not his fault, but
It's weird
may,
casting.
yeah,
It is, yeah.
I will say that because on the whole, I do think Jake Gyllenhaal's a pretty good actor from some things I've seen him in the
yeah, I
past.
agree.
And
I
it's a
a
weird
thousand
choice
percent
for him to
agree.
be who they chose to do this movie. Um, but I guess to kind of maybe go back to what I was mentioning earlier, which is I mentioned Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I said I was going to come back to that, and I actually wasn't joking because once I realized that this isn't the movie Roadhouse, it's the movie Dalton, then I realized all they're doing here is having like an 80s, early 90s action flick of a character who has very little emotion and is just like a pure killing machine who has to overcome insurmountable odds to win this fight. This is every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Like he is just Jean-Claude Van Damme in this movie. And once I realized that, I was like, sweet, these one-on-one fights are like awesome because this is like Bloodsport. This is like all
I
these other
must have missed
movies
the
that he
part
was
where
in.
Dalton does the splits.
It was in there. I think it was on the part where they were in the water though, and it was only like a couple inches
Ooh.
deep, but it was there. Maybe it was more than a couple inches deep. They didn't show it. Anyway,
Well, I mean, now that you brought it up, what did you guys think of the fight scenes?
they
I
reminded me a
wasn't.
lot of Mission Impossible, which I just thought was really
Boo, boo.
I for
Um,
one was not a real big fan of the camera work.
No,
yes.
It was
so
like very weird, like action camera most of the time. It was like zipping around, and there's like those like blur effect, and it's like
so
No chance to
slow
breathe.
down.
I haven't looked super deep into this, but apparently this movie tried to do like some sort of groundbreaking camera work for the fight scenes where they filmed the scenes in their entirety from like multiple different angles and then attempted to stitch it all together to make it feel more like realistic and visceral.
Yeah.
I feel like the
interesting.
result often looks like really bad CGI. And I don't know if it actually is CGI or if it's just like a weird effect from the fact that they're trying to like stitch all this stuff together digitally. But I thought the fight scenes looked atrocious, just like from a visual standpoint. Like I just thought they looked terrible for the most part.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, they attempted to do some things to up the stakes, like the whole speedboat thing where they're fighting in the water and someone gets like clocked in the back of the head. I mean, they tried to up the stakes, but it also just feels like they're trying too hard. And that coupled with the camera work that they were attempting to do, it doesn't none of it clicks. It's just give me a good old fashioned knockdown, drag out fight scene any day over this. The original Roadhouse or the freaking the alleyway fight from They Live, or like any old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or Jackie Chan even, just where there's a kinetic feel to it, where there's weight behind what's going on instead of all where there's shots that can actually stay in one place for more than like 2 seconds before spazzing out to another angle. Just I don't know when Hollywood forgot how to do fight scenes, but it happened and it's terrible.
It did not bother me at all in this movie.
I'm shocked.
Just looked like I was watching a wrestling match or MMA or something else that was very visceral in your face type stuff.
Well, I think like the choreography, like the actual like motions and stuff were fine. It was just like the motion of the camera
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
it didn't
Like
bother me. I
the way
didn't
the
notice
camera moved around, it was like different angles and stuff. That's what bothered me. Like
Yeah, I
the
agree.
fights themselves, I thought were fine. Were even pretty good generally, but yeah.
I honestly, I feel like it's hard for me to separate the two. Like, I was so distracted by the way that it looked that it was hard for me to even really pay attention to, the actual moves and what was happening.
It's interesting. You guys are all hung up on the camera work. I actually thought the camera work for a lot of this movie was quite beautiful. Non-facetiously, like the shots in the ocean, the way they were showing the water and the scenery. There were even some weird shots of like the bands when they were playing that they were taking from different angles that I thought made it seem like we were like behind the wall, behind the screen with the band at a few times. Sometimes we were like at the screen with the band. So even like the fake wall that they had in the club, I thought they used pretty effectively with us as like the viewer, if I'm making
No.
any sense there. But
Yeah, the stuff out of the fights I think was
Yeah.
was great, but just it's just
yeah.
in the fight was what
Okay.
what I had issues with. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. What else?
well, I think we should at least talk about some favorite quotes here. You guys have any favorite
I
quotes?
have, let's see, nobody wins a fight.
I didn't write that down.
I didn't either. I didn't write down any quotes for this movie.
Oh.
The only other one besides that stood out to me and that actually did get an ironic chuckle is when Jake Gyllenhaal is fighting the Irish guy, the Plank Sizzle Beef or whatever the hell his name was, and they're in the boat. I think he's like, "Hey, we got ourselves our own little octagon." And Gyllenhaal's like, "Who taught you shapes?" And that
did
actually
make
got
me
a laugh
laugh.
out of me.
It did make me laugh too. I mean, can we talk about Connor McGregor? Who?
Hold on, we got to do a couple more quotes yet.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, I love the quote with the two bad guys here. And the one guy says, "What are you whittling?" He says, "A stick." And he's like, "What's it going to be?" "A smaller stick." I thought that was hilarious.
I enjoyed how ridiculous that was. Yeah.
And then like later, it was kind of almost like foreshadowing because they had the like stick fight at the end with the things in the bar that were whittled. I mean, they weren't whittled down; they were shards. But I was like, "That's amazing callback." And then Connor McGregor saying, "It's been a while since I've been clubbing with this golf club." I enjoyed that one.
Jesus
And
Christ.
then I also, wait, before I say this last one, does anybody have any other quotes they wrote down?
No, because this movie's fucking terrible. As is like the
dang.
writing throughout is like the worst thing
All
I've
right.
ever seen.
I
The
kind of
other
wondered if it
one
was
that I
written by
wrote
AI
down,
at one point.
not because I thought it was great, but I wrote down the line where they're fighting in the roadhouse at the end, Conor McGregor and Jake Gyllenhaal, and they stop fighting, and the one guy says, "Piano's out of tune." And the other guy says, "Sounds pretty good to me." And then they keep fighting, which I didn't think was a good line. However, I did write down in my notes here verbatim, "Who's going to comment on this tonight when we do the podcast?" It's an 80s line delivered in 2024, so they're going to say it's not going to work. My money is on Justin. So when you started talking about the boat scene, I was hoping I was right, but damn.
Expectations subverted.
Oh, you and your double deuce diner.
What did you guys think of Conor McGregor as the kind of big bad here?
I don't want to fight him. I know that.
Yeah, it would have been great if they hired someone who could act.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you said that. Literally one of the worst performances I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
What? Not even close. What are you talking about?
I mean, he was no Neil Breen, but
oh my God,
that's
I would have rather watched Neil Breen in this role.
No. Oh my God.
I think he's not a great actor, but he made a great character.
Exactly.
It was like
disagree.
completely ridiculous. It made like he's just walking around like a gorilla. The whole
I couldn't
time.
take him seriously.
So
like,
you can't put them down.
Even like, I mean, even being an actual fighter as he is, like, I could not take him seriously as this, intimidating presence because he's just so terrible and like over the top, like,
yeah,
to a ridiculous degree.
Are we talking about a reason that Patrick Swayze now or Conor McGregor? I'm confused.
I'm not
But
going to
there's
dignify
a
that with a response.
there's a reason I have him listed as things like, blast hard cheese in my notes here, because he's just a I keep using cartoonish, but he is a
Blast hard
cartoonish
cheese.
buffoon
He
muscle
truly is a cartoon
lab of a
character.
man.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, if this gets him to, if he shows up at my house and like beats the shit out of me for saying this, then okay, I guess I deserved it. But I mean, he
Maybe
can't
he'll
act.
make you drink his shitty whiskey instead.
That's it.
He
We're
makes
tagging him
whiskey.
for sure on this.
But I mean, the man, he looked like he was having a good time, but that doesn't mean he can act. It was like they took the father character from Boondock Saints and told him to be silly, and it just jumped him into this role, and that's basically that's the character. If you can
I
call
mean,
him
he
a
doesn't
character.
have the acting chops of Mr. Sir Terry Funk, but who does? I mean, that's
Well,
know.
I mean, Terry Funk wasn't even like, after a while, he wasn't even like the main heavy of the bad guys.
Yeah.
In the first movie.
You tell yourself that. We know what was happening off camera.
I'm sure we do.
Things
It
were
was the
getting
80s.
funky.
Pile drivers were happening off camera. I guarantee it.
But man, it's like after a while, I know I jokingly said pain does hurt, and when we were talking about this leading up to it, and I think Brett, you were the one who said apply alcohol to it. Yeah, I was drinking like halfway through this movie, hoping they would ironically get better. It didn't. It didn't.
Maybe you missed the wonderful through plot line with the little girl in her book with the tree in the highway. That finally showed up 1 hour and 52 minutes into the film when we finally saw the tree growing out of the highway.
And everyone learned something from it, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Uh-huh.
God, I hated that whole situation. Let's throw a cute local girl in there for us to try to believe that Dalton has some sort of tie to this community.
Also, she felt like an alien. Like some of the lines she delivered didn't even seem like they followed in the conversation.
No.
It was like, you're like, he said something and she's like, oh, you're like from an Old West story. I'm like, what? Or
She's the little kids from the monsters that do on Maple Street from the Twilight Zone. That's what the aliens would tell us. One of us would be disguised as them.
I feel,
Okay,
I don't know.
can we talk about how great the music was in this movie, though?
No.
Because it actually was, and I'm not being facetious
there
on
was
this
some
either.
good music.
I like that they had the wide variety of music on
Yeah,
this. There's definitely
that's
like
fair.
the Cuban
Yeah.
influence, the Florida influence.
Yeah,
They had some soul
that's
in
fair.
there.
It did actually feel like bar music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, also though, like let's go back to the fact that in this movie, the Roadhouse never really feels like a shithole.
Yeah.
Like, is the first scene where he walks in, I was like, oh, that looks like a pretty nice place. I want
would
to
love to
hang
go to
out
that
there.
bar.
Like,
It's
yeah,
got
it
an
looks
ocean
great.
view and fresh air blowing through, and yeah.
Yeah.
It's that place you could get married, divorced,
Nah.
whatever other parts were in that quote from the movie that I can't recall.
It's not worth it, Cody.
What did you guys think of the love interest and the very strong relationship that is portrayed in this movie?
I mentioned in passing that it sometimes felt to me like this was written by an AI, and the more I think about it, the more I think I would believe it if that were the case, because it just, as everything is told in such broad strokes, and I emphasize the word "told" because we're not really shown any development or any thing on screen that we can put together ourselves. We're told everything, and that's like one of the cardinal sins of writing. And yeah, as a result, none of it feels like it carries any gravity. None of it feels really believable or impactful, and the whole love story is no exception to that.
He's just an outsider passing through the town, like an old Western, Justin. He leaves him the money to the people that need it most. Somebody made the comment like it doesn't feel like he's connected to the town. I think that's like kind of part of the point of the movie is he never was connected to the town. That's why he left at the end of the movie and moved on to the next place.
Yeah, but it seems like the device with the girl and her dad running the bookstore, like that was shoehorned in there just to give him a reason to care about the community for a brief moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't buy that connection at all. Versus, I mean, in the original one, I do believe that he, gets ingrained in the community and he hits it off with the Red, the guy who owns the auto parts store, who,
Yeah.
and the guy he's renting from, like it feels like he builds a rapport with these people. And so as things escalate, I believe that he would want to kind of go to bat for them.
Mhm.
And in this version, it just feels completely forced.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
I would agree that I wouldn't. It doesn't really have any reason to like support these people other than the money.
I think it's
Yeah.
more his personal journey, though, again, with just like, though it's not explained well, and I agree with you guys who explained this earlier, but like, I think it's his thing of like, he has this uncontrollable rage that he gets past this point on, and like to him, they'd pushed him past that point finally, and so the revenge tour of greatest hits at the end is like him wanting to like just snap and kill people, I think, more so than he's necessarily doing it to save the people around him.
that's not someone I want to root for, though.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
I
he's
mean,
a guy that
that's-
killed another guy in the ring. I don't think he's a rootable character necessarily.
So
I don't
then
know.
what's the point? I mean,
Yeah,
that's my
that's true.
problem is like
This
who
feels
is
like
this
it's like a
character?
chapter out of a larger story, to be quite honest.
It doesn't feel like there is a story
Yeah.
is the problem.
I know you do think that. You say that all the time, yeah. Great
Man,
movie. Hey, did you guys know the hospital's 25 minutes away? Also,
I
I
thought he
loved
didn't have
the
any more
character.
quotes.
I loved Luis from Ant-Man, who had his arm in the cast the whole second half of the movie there. It's not really Luis from Ant-Man,
which
but I
guy is
did
that?
I did actually love that character though.
He probably was the best part of the whole movie.
Is
for me,
that
Yeah, he really
Arturo
was.
honestly.
Castro as
I don't
Mo?
know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
That
A
sounds
little
right.
like Latinx guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, the guy
who
who-
spike off at the
yeah.
end.
Yeah, no, I did.
Didn't
I
want to
do
be in a
have,
biker gang, but then found himself there anyways.
I do have that in my notes that he was funny and one of the few
Yeah.
highlights of the movie. Like he was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Um,
sheriff with the change of heart. I mean, there's deep stuff all over the place.
That
here.
made me. Oh, I cannot even tell you how angry the whole sheriff situation made me.
Once again, hero kills guys and sheriff
They
covers for
kidnapped
him.
my
Let's see what's
daughter.
going
Just
on here.
kidding. They didn't kidnap my daughter. I'm in on it with the bad guys.
Wait,
oh wait,
you
you
did?
did
I may have
kidnap
actually
my
taken her.
daughter? What?
Yeah.
Oh,
just-
now that I know you did kidnap my daughter, which who could have seen that coming because you're a deranged billionaire? I'm on Dalton's side now. Oh wait, but not really.
Mhm.
Dalton, you better get out of here before I decide to arrest you.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the girl's the one that told him to leave, not the dad. But
Right.
still.
God,
Yeah.
the
Oh, that
girl-
makes it so
like,
much better.
the whole love interest just did not work for me.
No.
We get another movie.
Here's the thing: in the
The
first
last month with the
Roadhouse,
gator death. Oh man, it's becoming a theme, Brett.
in the first Roadhouse, Kelly Lynch is not the best actress necessarily,
True.
but I feel like Patrick Swayze has enough chemistry for both of them.
Oh, what are you
Like
talking
it just
about?
works.
No,
In this one, there is like nothing. Like there is absolutely nothing between these characters.
I
Yeah,
agree.
it
This
did-
one is
it did
0.
kind
That
of-
one is -5. That's about where the chemistry is right in these movies.
It did kind of feel like in this one, it was like, someone picked up two action figures and like smushed them together and was like, now kiss. Just like,
That may be the best review I've ever heard.
It's true.
well, we got to end it here then. I mean,
Well, like
geez.
honestly, Jessica Williams, who plays the owner of the Roadhouse in this one, I like her a lot as an actress. Like I've seen her in a couple other things. If I was Dalton, I would have been trying to pursue her. She is at least like charming and funny. Like this,
she was
the
a high
main
point.
actress in
Yeah.
this movie is like nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
They all
anyone else
lied
have-
to him, man. He can't trust anybody in this town. The club owner lied to him. The sheriff's daughter lied to him. Sheriff lied. This is just
Well, that's another thing, though. I mean, just thinking about the town and the fact that the villain's focus on this is so centered in on the Roadhouse. Everything about this movie feels smaller than the original. Like in the original, the villain already controls like the entire town, and he doesn't even really take note of the Roadhouse until Dalton starts cleaning it up. And it's a matter of in the remake, he's so focused on just tearing down the Roadhouse, and that's his only thing. The more I think about it, the more it's just everything in this feels diminished. It's like a pale shadow of the original material, where it doesn't build anything, and not only that, it feels lesser by comparison. So
Agreed.
he already owned the rest of the island. Justin, they explained this when they showed us the blueprints.
I have a question. because I realized today that there was a mid-credit sequence that I had missed originally.
Oh, there
Oh,
was.
I don't
I
know.
didn't see that
I
either.
was in such a hurry to turn this movie off as soon as the credits started rolling that I didn't realize that there was like a mid-credit scene.
Same.
Um, it's basically just Connor McGregor's character.
Ooh.
It turns out he's still alive,
Yeah.
and for some reason he beats the shit out of a bunch of like nurses and people in the hospital he is in, and
Oh.
then walks out the door of the hospital wearing a gown and his ass is exposed because it's
Again.
hilarious. Like, I feel like that scene kind of like sums up this movie. It's so completely like tone deaf and just over the top, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, why is he beating up all these medical professionals? Like,
He's an asshole. You
he's
haven't
just
gotten that
such
in the
a,
movie?
all he
Okay,
knows how to do is like
yeah,
be
going back.
crazy and kill people. I don't know.
Yeah, going
It's
back to what you were
stupid.
saying earlier, Cody, does that mean we should be rooting for him? Because, if the main character is just, so it has violence so ingrained with him, and then at the end he fully snaps and just wants to kill people, why aren't we rooting for
Yeah.
Slab Fireplug here? I
No,
mean,
I think you're interpreting what I'm saying backwards. I don't think we should be rooting for either of them.
oh,
I think it's more like the Punisher. I feel like they're just anti-heroes who have like this great personal history that's weighing on them, that's just making them
Can we
snap
not
and do
pretend
things
that
we
this
shouldn't
movie
do.
is remotely smart or deep enough to like explore that sort of
Okay, listen,
relationship?
if you're going to bring it up and then ask me to defend it, I'm going to tell you the viewpoint on it because I think that's
I
the
do
answer to your
not for a
question.
second believe that the writer and director of this movie were trying to examine the futility of violence.
I don't know about that, but I do know that I greatly enjoyed the fight at the end where they were having the spike battle and stabbing each other. I thought that was actually pretty damn awesome.
When they played Enter Sandman for no reason at all.
Yes, they did. A weird version of it, but yes.
So I think that was supposed to be our signal that he was going into the same murder rage that he entered in the ring, because it's also playing during the scene where we see that go down.
Oh, I didn't catch
But
that.
again, like
Way
none
to
of
pay
this is
close
really
attention,
established.
Joe. I didn't catch that. Way to pay close attention.
Anyway, anyone have any other thoughts before we put numbers on this thing?
I have exhausted my notes, actually.
Let's see if I have anything else here.
The first thing that one of the first things I wrote down here was there's that scene early on where what's this guy's name? Ben Brandt. But he's like on the boat and like his henchmen are like telling him like, oh, we got fucked up, blah blah blah, and they're like he's trying to get a shave on a moving boat in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, it's so good.
I don't know if that was meant to make him feel like a villain. It just made him feel like an idiot.
yes.
And maybe that was the point too. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was just like it was so stupid. Like he's expecting to actually get a good shave and not get cut when the waves are bouncing this boat all over the place. And he's like cussing out the guy who's just trying to do his job.
Also, how did his dad not get out of jail in this movie? I fully expected when I had like even 21 minutes left watching, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
his dad's getting out somehow.
Yeah, I
No.
kept waiting for the father to show up. Like, it's just ridiculous.
So for all they know, Connor McGregor actually wasn't sent by his dad. He just showed up.
yeah. Why the heck not?
Well, let's rate this thing.
Love it.
Who wants to go first?
I think
Sounds
you
like Cody
should.
does.
I think you should, Joe.
All right.
Sounds like you have a lot of strong
I'll-
feelings here.
You know what? I think I'm gonna adjust my rating actually.
Uh-oh, he's going down.
All right. I mean, I think I've made my feelings about this movie pretty.
You can only go to 10. No
strongly
11s
felt.
allowed here.
No, I mean, as I said before, going into this, I didn't really expect it to feel like Roadhouse, but I at least hoped that it would be a fun action movie. And it ended up just being a nothing burger. Like, it's not even bad enough to be interesting. It's just kind of, it's just like nothing. Like, there's nothing compelling about it. I mean, it doesn't have enough in common with the original to make it feel like a remake, but it also doesn't have any like charms of its own. Like, it's there's it's just nothing. Like the second I turned the movie off, I just didn't think about it again. I mean, I can't honestly say it's the worst movie I have ever seen, but again, if it was a worse movie, it at least might have been interesting to talk about.
Hmm.
So, all this being said, I settled on a 3 out of 10 for the 2024 version of Roadhouse.
Woo! Might be
Anyone
some-
else?
I'll jump in here. Why not? So, like I said before, I think this version of Dalton was not an interesting character. They didn't do anything with him. It's like zero progression really through the film, and I've never been a real big fan of Jake Gyllenhaal. And I don't think he did anything to improve this character at all. I think it was a weird casting choice.
He worked out a lot.
Good for him. There were several moments in this movie where I wouldn't even say laughed necessarily. I more like like chuckled. There was a bit of dialogue that was either like fun or it was not clever, but just like there was a bit of decent writing in there. But it was a lot of times it was just I was like laughing at those ridiculous situations more than it was like humorous writing. And there's just like lots of things that were just crazy. Like, one of the bar fight scenes, there's like kayaks hanging from the ceiling of the bar, and somehow people were like in the kayaks fighting each other. Like, what the hell? How would that happen?
Bar fight!
Zero sense. Just like stuff like that. And it like I didn't enjoy the characters. I didn't think the writing was good. The plot was not great. I had heard somewhere that it was meant to be a campy movie, but I don't think it even succeeded at that, really. It was like not even campy enough to be called that. I don't think, but
it definitely was not campy.
Yeah. I don't know. Like it's kind of like Joe said, there just wasn't a lot here to really give it points on it. I mean, it had no boobs, it had a lot of butts, and not even ones I wanted to see. So I lost points there. Overall, I mean, I kind of enjoyed parts of it, but overall it was not a great movie at all. I would probably drop this down to about a 4. Let's settle on 4. Yeah.
Well, touching on the thing you said about the guys in the canoes, that just reinforces my idea that this thing was written by AI. It's like bar fight scene. The bar is fighting. There are canoes on the ceiling. People are fighting over the canoes. It's just like it feels very just unhinged, but not in a way that is fun or entertaining. It just feels like words were vomited onto a page and someone had to film it. So failing the AI thing, it feels like a movie that was very much made by a committee. Like, there needs to be a joke here, write a funny joke, and just, well, it doesn't really fit in this context, sir. It doesn't matter. There's to be a joke here, and there needs to be a love interest. Make them kiss, that sort of thing. It just it is the most. It's kind of the epitome of what's wrong with a lot of action flicks these days. They're just, okay, we have to hit these bullet points. We need explosions or people, getting in fistfights with cameras that can't stay still for more than a second, and it just feels hollow. And you get that with a lot of other action flicks these days, where they don't have the punch, no pun intended, of action movies that we grew up with. It doesn't feel like there's any sort of impact to a lot of the fights, or if there is, you can't see it long enough to really appreciate it. And if you can't appreciate the fights, then, well, you have to fall back on the writing and the world building, and good luck with that here. So yeah, I went into this with low expectations, and I was still disappointed. And this is coming from someone who's yeah, and Roadhouse, the original, isn't my favorite movie or anything, but even so, I feel this is a disservice to the original. If you look at it even in a vacuum, why was it made? It's just that there's no heart here. There's no soul to it. It's just it's 2 hours of my life that I'll never get back, and I did not really enjoy any of it. I've seen worse films, but not many. I'm gonna have to also go 3 out of 10 for this. So just not an enjoyable experience at all.
Oof.
Here comes Cody with a 9.5.
I'm going to give this a 9.5, and let me tell you why. No, first of all, I want to begin my final evaluation here by telling you why I think this movie is part of the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. You see,
This is Iron Fist, isn't it?
when Dalton leaves town, hear me out on this now, he's
I have
haunted
to
by the
work tomorrow,
fact that
Cody.
he
Come
punches
on.
people in the face so often that he decides that he won't do that anymore. And so he moves to a completely technologically based warfare style while also persuading the public in his shame of the past that he's now a hero. He develops the character of Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and he furthers his beginning of his mentorship that he had with Billy in this film, later changed to Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Using not his hands,
I
he's
do
now
have to
using this
say
drone
that
technology
I
to
love Jake
project
Gyllenhaal as
images and have
Mysterio, for the
illusions
record.
take place, which make him seem like he is entirely now the good guy. But, in fact, he's still soulless inside. What did you say, Joe?
I said I actually loved Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio in the Spider-Man movie. I thought he was good in that.
Oh, that makes sense. You would. Anyway, aside from that, once I realized again, this is where I'm going to put my rating on as well, that this is not a Roadhouse movie. This is a Dalton movie.
It's not a Dalton movie because there is no Dalton. There is nothing to this
There's only
character.
Zool.
All right, I said if it was my 80s movie, I'd be equally pissed, Joe. I get it. I understand your
That
rage.
has nothing to do with
I
it.
feel your rage, okay? I do. There might
How
be
many
streets of
degrees
rage.
in English do you have?
More than I should. Let's move on.
I would think you would know something about story and character development.
Yeah,
I would
okay,
hope
that's
so,
no,
anyway.
Ooh,
hold on,
shots
Joe.
fired.
That's exactly my point. So thank you.
Okay.
That's
Okay, go
exactly
on.
my point. If this movie had been made in 1989, but starred Jean-Claude Van Damme, you'd be sitting here singing his praises, as was Justin, about all these amazing fight scenes they had in this soulless action hero who has zero relationship with anybody else in the movie, but is an amazing fighter, and that's basically the plot of the movie. They make up a shit plot to have people fight. That's what they did here.
They would
It's
have
a
had better
shit
camera
plot
work.
to have people fight.
They would not have had CGI.
I don't know that they had CGI, did they?
Yes.
Okay,
I
well,
was too drunk. I don't know.
there you go. To me, this was a decent fight movie. It's not a great movie, but I did think it was a decent fight movie. I thought the visceralness of the fights actually were not too bad. So I'm going to give this a nice.
Did you say you're giving it a nice ass?
Connor McGregor's. I'm going to give this movie 5.5 Connor McGregor nice asses.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Looks like we have
2 cheeks from during the movie, 2 cheeks from
the
mid-credits.
original Roadhouse with an average of 8 out of 10. And the remake with an average of 3.88 out of 10. So we'll let you, the listener, decide which one you feel like spending your time on.
Well, sadly, of the 2 of these, I think only one of these is going to be revisited in the Pondies later this year.
Womp womp.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to just about do it for this episode. Except for one last thing, Brett.
Oh no.
Someone
Yes.
sticks a gun in your face. You've got 2 choices. What are they?
You either kill the motherfucker or you die.
That's true. How would you kill a motherfucker in that situation?
Kick him in the balls.
Ooh.
Would
That's
that
a
kill
really hard
someone?
kick.
Depends if they're full of cum enough to fill a dump truck.
So this is my question about that. Because, like, do you have to have giant, like, theoretically, anyone with any size balls could come in a dump truck. Is Terry Funk saying that his balls are so big that he could fill the dump truck with semen? Because
or produce enough force
Wow.
to project
I
from
mean,
the
I have a
ground
question.
up into.
Is Dalton a tanuki? Like, how big are his balls? Which then raises the question: could a tanuki fill a dump truck? They're hilarious to this.
You know, Joe, it takes a village.
And scene. All right, folks. Getting a little slap happy over here, so I think that's finally gonna put an end to this episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Tune in next time.
Bye.
Bye.